assume that emails can be made public as part of your role as a HRB member. Jeez. Public hearing procedures. The staff report's available 7 days before a hearing. You know, we have the applicant's presentation, we have the testimony by interested parties, we have the applicant's rebuttal, and we have deliberation. The city's public hearing procedures allow for time limits. It is certainly in the HRB's prerogative to decide to use time limits. It is up to you how you want to use time limits, but they need to be fair. If you're going to give advocates for a particular position 5 minutes, you need to give opponents of the same position 5 minutes too. If you're going to impose time limits, you need to impose them across the board in a fair way. Again, this is, you're sitting as a judge, being fair to everybody and giving everyone the same amount of time is important. So we get through a hearing, and oh, the other thing I want to tell you about sort of the testimony portion of a hearing. Folks come to testify, and sometimes they say things that are either unclear or irrelevant or are not focused on the application that is before you, and you understand that, right? I think that, in my mind, best practice is just to let the testimony be. We are in the business of efficient decision making, so we want the hearing to move along. And if we get off talking about, with a particular testifier, about things that we either believe are irrelevant, or unless we have specific questions, I certainly question the witness, but we don't want to get off on a judgment situation with regard to a particular piece of testimony if we can avoid it. Because one, we need to move the decision along, and two, you are a judge. A judge, I mean, think about all the courtroom TV you've ever watched. The judge does not, you know, go after the lawyer for whether or not the particular point is relevant or not during the hearing, right? The judge sits there and they wait, right? And they wait. And you think about it, if you insert your opinion until all the evidence is heard, it calls into question whether or not you are listening to all of the testimony, right? And you have an open mind. You are to hear all the testimony and then make a decision based on all the testimony, and not to judge particular pieces as the hearing goes along. All right, deliberation during the decision and the decision. Okay, so you've heard all the testimony, you've got a staff report, you've got everything. You have a couple of jobs. The first job is to interpret the applicable criteria. And the applicable criteria we've talked about are the things that are in 1740. I pulled out 1740 or 1740-060F. This is the new construction criteria to be used by the board in reaching the decision in a historic with regard to a historic district or a site. The first criterion that you're supposed to consider is the purpose of the historic conservation district or historic district as set forth in the purpose statement, and I've included the purpose statements from 1740-010. And the thing that strikes me about these purpose statements is how ambiguous and general and broad they are, and about how it would be easy to make a case that most of these are satisfied in most cases. You know, a couple of things that jumped out at me. The obligation is to effect and accomplish the protection of historic resources, right? So how do we accomplish that protection? We do it in a number of ways. One, we identify what it is we're protecting, right? We look at the historic district as a whole. We look at what made the historic district significant, right? And then we talk about what it is, both from the greater historic district that made it significant, and then we get down closer in on the site, right? And we look at what contributing resources are surrounding the resource or what the proposal. And, right, what does it look like from the street? And we talk about layout, and we talk about access, and we talk about massing, and then we get even closer in and we talk about design, and then we talk about details, right? And so all of those things go together to accomplish protection in some way of the resource. But unless you know what the resource is, you don't know what you're protecting. The other thing about this purpose statement is it says promote the use of historic districts for education, pleasure, energy conservation, housing, and public welfare of the city. This suggests to me that we're not supposed to just hold these things in bronze and never do anything with them, right? These districts, these resources are supposed to be used, and we need to be thinking about their use and how they get used. And if folks can't get certificate of appropriateness to do things, they won't get used, right? So we need to keep that in mind when we talk about purpose. Another thing that I thought was interesting is there's sort of a discussion about property values here, and we often have folks come in and talk about how a particular proposal will affect their property values, right? It talks about stabilize and improve property values in districts. That doesn't talk about one resource. That talks about the district. And so, that's one of those things that is I try not to make planning decisions based on property value because I think that's a real arbitrary and subjective way to evaluate things. But it certainly does appear here as a purpose statement, and it also appears, value appears as one of the remaining new construction criteria, the economic effect of the new proposed structure on the historic value of the district. So economic effect and historic value, that's again, it's one of those things that you could spend a lot of time thinking about what this is supposed to mean, right? But at the end of the day, I think that the purpose is to protect these resources and protect the historic value of the district. And in a way that gives some economic value to both the historic resource owner and the person seeking to use build new construction in a historic district. So these are the standards. Number 7 is the design guidelines adopted by the Historic Review Board. And so you guys have done enough of these reviews to know what the guidelines look like. But they set forth a series of principles of sort of what's good and what's not allowed. And in my mind, a lot of these are sort of obvious. Like there's one that shows height, and they shows like a one-story building, a one-story contributing structure, and then it shows a 3-story new structure, and then a 1-story contributing structure. It says this is incompatible. Well, duh. I mean, I got that. But things are never that simple, right? It's never that obvious. And so, there's always going to be unique circumstances that is going to require your judgment. But when we're talking about things like orientation and spacing, you have to look at the context of what's surrounding it. You have to look at what the rhythm of the resource of the district and what you're trying to preserve is. And from there, you can evaluate whether or not the proposal satisfies those requirements. I understand that the Secretary of Interior standards comes up sometimes, and the Secretary of Interior standards set requirements for additions and alterations, and they have no application to new construction. Again, new construction is to be reviewed by these design guidelines as sort of a consideration of different design components. So once you have interpreted the criteria, decided what is significant, decided what the standard appropriate orientation is, what the appropriate spacing is, what the appropriate massing is, what the appropriate height is, what the appropriate design is, once you have decided that, then you have to make adequate findings, and that's where staff comes in, providing a staff report, and then revising the staff report to be consistent with your deliberation. And so the more detail that you can give us in your findings or your analysis of the criteria, the better staff can perform the job of providing adequate findings. And that's the explanation for why the criteria are met. The decisions have to be based on substantial evidence, meaning is there evidence in the record to support the conclusions identified in the findings? This is, what the finishes look like. This is the sample board. This is the utility plans. This is the landscape plans. This is that you have sufficient information about buffering and what the size of the trees are going to be. You have sufficient evidence about rendering. You have the sufficient rendering documents that show what the new project's going to look like from the street. This is the applicant bears the burden of producing this evidence. If they don't produce this evidence, you can't approve the application. And you are also charged with weighing the evidence to make a choice when the evidence is in conflict. So it is your judgment that gets to decide what the most reliable evidence is. And once you have done that, courts will defer to your judgment. Finally, there are conditions of approval, and conditions of approval may be attached to ensure that all the applicable approval standards are or can be met. Staff usually proposes conditions of approval, and then you are certainly invited to amend or add new ones as you see fit. We generally try to, if we can approve an application with conditions, we try to do that. Again, because we want historic resources and new resources in historic districts to get used, but you have discretion to determine what those conditions of approval should be. I would be happy to answer any questions or take any comments or any feedback, or, you've got 30 seconds.
I do have one question.
Sure.
In there, you talked about the 120 days, but there's times when we, as part of the record, extend it, or?
The applicant has control over the 120 days, and what happens oftentimes is the applicant decides to extend it because they want to.
Because
they
circumstances.
Yeah, right.
We can't do that. They have to be the ones that are willing to.
And the thing I probably should have said, we were talking about the procedures. As you probably know, and we say in the disclosures, that at the initial hearing, any party can ask for a continuance, and they are entitled to it by law. It's only at the initial hearing. That's the very first hearing. Any party is entitled to a continuance, and in which case the hearing has to be continued, and you start it up at the continued hearing.
To a date certain.
To a date certain. There's another way to deal with that we call, where you can close the public hearing and you can do it by written testimony, but that takes 21 days, which takes longer really than coming back for a next hearing. So we usually opt for a continuance.
Cool.
Other questions? Riveting stuff, I know.
It's exciting.
Sorry.
We appreciate your coming here and presenting that.
Well, a lot of it was familiar, because we've been doing it, but it's good seeing, the reasons and kind of how it all filters down and makes sense.
And I am always available to talk through anything, as is Christina or Kelly. So please don't hesitate to ask us questions, because things we may take for granted, we just are too close to it, you know? And you guys provide the new eyes and ears and for all of it, so we really appreciate that.
So if I could add just one thing, just remind staff is a resource. So we are here to talk to applicants. We're here to talk to the Historic Review Board. We're here to talk to anybody that is looking for guidance or resource. So we don't have ex parte contact. And again, please, the only time you can reply all to the HRB is to say, I won't be at the meeting. So pretty much we try only contact back the staff member. There should never be a time where you reply all to any emails that have any content other than logistics. So
Come to my Christmas party.
yes. So that's a key, but reminded, if there's ever a question, call up staff and say, you know, I was reading the staff report and I'm confused here. What does this mean? And we absolutely will walk you through. And we do that with applicants as well as community members that call as well. So we're the opposite of the ex parte conversation. We have it with everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else? I think then we will break for the next 15 minutes and reconvene at 7 o'clock. January and June. Have all members had the opportunity to review these? And I will ask then for additions or corrections on the January minutes. Starting with,
Do I refer to you as Chair Basinger?
you
Is
may.
that how? Okay. I'm just looking and wondering, oh, I'm not going to be calling out commissioner names anymore. I'm gonna be saying
Chair.
board member or chair.
These are all cooler names.
I respond to a lot of different names.
Well, thank you. I do have an addition to make to the January minutes. I don't think they state who was present. We took a look at the video just now, and it was, let's see, we had Claire, Derek, Ken, and Grant in attendance.
Right. I just looked through the, who did the minutes, or I mean, motions and stuff, so. Cool.
So with that correction, are there any others that anybody noted?
I can't remember a lot. But, yeah, I didn't see any glaring. So I'll move to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2017. With the corrections of the members that were here, board members.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I was gonna say, something.
Board member Mann?
I abstain,
Okay.
since I was not there.
Board member Met?
Aye.
Board member, or Chair Basinger?
Aye.
And board member McLaughlin?
Aye.
And now we move to the June 27th meeting minutes, which are a lot shorter. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to make to those?
No.
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
I second it.
Board member Mann?
Aye.
Board member Met?
Aye.
Chair Basinger?
Aye.
Board member McLaughlin?
Aye.
Very good. The meeting minutes are approved. Are there any public comments to be made on subjects not on the agenda? No? Okay, we'll move forward then. For a presentation and discussion on the McLaughlin Trail design, and I believe that'll be Ms. Reed.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Here we go. Can everyone see this on their screens? Wonderful.
There we go. Takes a while.
So I'm here today to share some information about the trail plan and maybe get a little bit of feedback on some of the design ideas. This trail is located within the Kenema National Register District and will also have an element that's within the McLaughlin Promenade property. And so before we move forward with adopting a concept plan, we wanted to touch base with Historic Review Board and get your thoughts on some of these elements that, you know, may or may not affect historic character in these areas. This trail plan was developed over the last several months with a group of stakeholders that formed an advisory committee. We had folks from the neighborhoods, both McLaughlin and Kenema, and representatives from various committees, and also staff with PGE, ODOT, and the city that were involved with this. Let's see. So we started just to share some of this is our transportation system plan map. Shows a series of different projects that connect up to create a trail. And so this trail was anticipated many years ago in our Trails Master Plan, and then also in the TSP, shown with this yellow line here going through Old Kenema Park, connecting to some routes within Kenema, and then connecting to the promenade to the north. Currently, the conditions in that area are not really friendly to pedestrians. And so creating a trail through here for both people walking and people on a bike would greatly improve the safety and access between these two areas. There is a PGE substation right next to Old Kenema Park, and that's why PGE was participating. Then, of course, we have Old Kenema Park. The pathway there exists, but it's not really all that wide, and it's actually fairly damaged by tree roots at the moment. And then you have streets within Kenema. None of the streets in Kenema have sidewalks, at least on 3rd, 4th, or 5th Avenues. And so right now people walk on the street and kind of share that space with cars. And knowing that we won't get sidewalks in Kenema, we are looking at some creative options, and that's kind of why we want to talk to you. We did look at alternative routes that don't take you directly through the park or through Kenema. One of these is High Street to South End Road, which currently looks like this. It has a little bit of a shoulder that could be used for a path, but there are some constraints there. And then we also talked about using the boardwalk that is along the 99E corridor on the river side of that street. Here's members from the advisory group and some staff walking the routes earlier this year. We had just crossed 99E at Jerome Street and identified the need for a safer crossing there if this were to be the trail alignment. So we engaged the community through the advisory group, but also through an event called Greenway for a Day. We actually lined the trail with cones and balloons for a 4-hour period on a Saturday in July, and invited the neighborhood folks to come and use it and then give us some feedback on their experiences. And so we were set up at Kenema Children's Park and at the Museum of the Oregon Territory, which were kind of the beginning and end of the trail. And people, almost 80 or over 80 people came out with their families, their dogs, their kids, their bikes. Most of them walked, but we had some bicyclists. And we got a lot of great input that day. And we also had a survey that they took. And then we posted that survey online as well for people to, anyone within the neighborhood who has, walked through the area before could take that survey as well. We heard, what we really heard was, there's a need for safety improvements, and that people really love Old Kenema Park. It's kind of a hidden gem. And so that kind of made us lean more towards the options that included the route through Old Kenema Park. So this was alignment. We considered 3 major alignments. This is one option that uses that boardwalk. The boardwalk is currently about 5 feet wide, and it's actually in not so great condition. It's needs a lot of repairs, and it's not really ADA, especially because of the staircase that takes you down there from the promenade, and then just kind of the bumpy old wood that's being used, and some of the nails that are kind of sticking up out of that need to be repaired. So this one was popular because of the closeness to the river, but there were major challenges with that as well. Alignment B was the most direct route, kind of taking you along 99 in front of PGE, and then through Old Kenema Park, and then on 4th Avenue in Kenema. And of course, we're starting, you see the VFW is labeled there. We're trying to connect directly to the McLaughlin Promenade, right next to the VFW there. The third option actually bypasses the VFW and connects the promenade to High Street via 2nd, and then continues on High Street, South End Road to 5th Avenue, and then uses some unimproved city right-of-way that goes kind of in between some private properties within Kenema to connect to Blanchard Street. So the group set goals and kind of vetted all 3 of these alignment options, came up with a recommendation. One is an interim trail alignment. So this is something that we might be able to implement sooner with fewer improvements and fewer costs. And then we have a permanent trail recommendation that's slightly different. So the interim trail would bypass the VFW. That steep driveway there is problematic, and so that was what the group wanted to avoid. And so we're going on High Street where it's a little more flat, and then connecting along 99 with some safety improvements, of course, because there isn't a sidewalk currently there, through PGE, Old Kenema Park, with some traffic calming in the Kenema neighborhood. In the long term, we would make some alterations to Tumwater Drive by the VFW, actually closing off that left turn from 99 onto Tumwater, so that you wouldn't have cars shooting through there. And then potentially even moving the VFW driveway from where it is today to 1st Street, so that people would access VFW from High Street and 1st, and go down into the parking lot there instead of coming on Tumwater. So that still needs some investigation, but it was one idea that we wanted to pursue. And then we'd have a crossing improvement at Tumwater and 2nd to get people safely through that intersection, potentially a flashing beacon. When redevelopment occurs in those parcels that are in between PGE and South 2nd, so there are 4 businesses there, 1 apartment building and 3 businesses. They're all zoned for mixed use, and so we anticipate that eventually they will redevelop. In that redevelopment, we could include, a trail along the backside of those new developments, and so the trail kind of goes behind those to avoid the traffic on 99, and then it swings up around PGE, and then continues on the same path as that interim trail did. And so within Old Kenema Park, we would be widening the trail. It might require a little bit of tree removal for the trees that are right next to the trail, with the roots that are kind of right now busting the asphalt up. This is an example of shared use path along a highway. Is something that we could accomplish along, potentially along that segment of 99E. So we have the trail kind of going behind the development, but in the event that it doesn't, and we have the permanent trail kind of out there along the road, then we would want some sort of separation, whether it be from landscaping or something a little more solid. And so we'd want some sort of separation like that. And then this is the area of the Promenade Park at 2nd Street, where we might have that interim connection. And so right now it's just grass. That might be something that our Parks Department would potentially want to connect with concrete. And so that, that because that's it's a National Register historic landmark, the Promenade, and so that would likely come before you, before we would actually build it. It would come before you as an application for review. And then within Kenema, this is kind of where we'd like most of your input. Of course, I'm happy to take input on all of this, but specifically within Kenema, we're thinking about certain treatments, avoiding, new curbs and sidewalks, but potentially including on-street markings. The arrows that are shown on the right with the little pedestrian and bike symbols, we actually spray painted those with temporary spray paint on, with it was chalk paint onto the streets for the Greenway event. And so we would be thinking of using something in that family of symbols to mark the streets as a shared space. It probably wouldn't look exactly like that, but that would be an example of something we could use. Visual narrowing, the picture below the list of items there is narrowing of a street by using, landscaping and curbs. We can accomplish something similar with paint. Of course, it's not going to stop a car from driving over the paint, but just psychologically it narrows the street, and so maybe would get people to slow down. Wayfinding signage is another thing that that the group preferred within Kenema to kind of help people get around, and also announce that you're in a historic district, and watch out for this is also a trail. Potentially adding a couple more stop signs at some of the intersections, and then potentially adding speed humps. The last two things were not necessarily a priority for the group, but they would be kind of second on the list if the first three items didn't really do the job to calm traffic enough. The other thing that we're pursuing in Kenema is changing the speed limit to 20 miles per hour. There's a new state statute that allows us to do that. Previously, we had been, it was state standard 25 miles per hour, and you can't change it on local streets. But when you have now, with the new law, if you have a designated bike route or pedestrian route, and you have a certain traffic count that this actually would meet, then you can reduce that speed limit to 20. And so we would be pursuing that as well. And I pulled the one page from our guidelines for new construction that talks about public improvements. Certain things are not allowed, and so we're trying to avoid those things, but make sure that we're in the good example column there. So like your reaction and advice to that, to what we're proposing, and whether you think it would meet those these guidelines. And then as far as adoption goes, we're amending our transportation plan and trails plan to reflect the trail and tweak the projects a little bit, just to be a little bit more specific now that we have a preferred alignment. We would be going to the Planning Commission November 13th, and then City Commission in December for adoption of that. So I will go back maybe to this page. We'd love to hear what you think.
It's very nice.
And to me, the streets are, fairly narrow, and so like the 20 miles an hour, I can't see anybody having a problem with that.
This photo on the left is Third Avenue.
Mm-hmm. That was on the Greenway for the day.
And 20 miles an hour would feel very, very fast on that.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone
And
drives
so-
that fast.
And I think when you go slower, you're more aware of your surroundings and stuff. And I think with, if you can do the markings on the streets, or, something like that, you keep people. And then you have, at some of the intersections, you have the flashing, where the person, so having something like that at some of the crossings instead of a stop sign, or in addition to, if you have a crosswalk and just pushing that button to make people aware. I don't know if that's, feasible or not, but.
That is something that we are looking at for South Second over by the Still House.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But we hadn't thought about doing that within the streets of Kenema.
No, I was talking about mainly where
where
there was going to be
Yep.
higher traffic and stuff, because when that's flashing, it really catches your attention, so, which is what you want.
Would you be making the street more regular so that you could tell where the sides were easier? Is that what part of the plan? Because it,
visionary.
you know, the picture with the current way is really irregular. And it looks like there aren't any defined driving lanes or any kind of lanes. It just kind of wanders like this.
And
Like this more.
yeah, and what we talked about that a lot. I think the quote that I kept hearing was, you know, Kenema was not designed for cars. It was designed for wagons and horses, and now we're trying to drive through it, and it's not great. But you know, those cars that are parked along the street and kind of the way that it does kind of get narrow and then get a little bit wider, that actually serves to slow the traffic down a little bit. Because if you have a parked car, you know, you have to slow down and go around it, and you know, there might not be enough space for two cars to pass each other, so you have to take turns, and so that actually helps slow down the traffic in a way. And so we have thought about, you know, keeping, you know, still allowing people to park on the side of the street there, maybe even defining that a little bit better, maybe having a parking permit program for the neighborhood residents, and then using paint to kind of delineate a narrower space, just to try and get people to slow down. So we wouldn't be defining lanes for any one person, but we'd be kind of creating edges with paint for people to try and stay within
Unless
those
they get
edges.
covered up with debris. But there's a lot of little streets around town that are very similar to that, you know, in that they, you know, you have, if somebody's parked on the street, you have to wait. You know, I mean, it's reality. But yeah, I think.
Right, Madison
You know, there's,
is that way.
Well, it may end up a discussion here regarding what is appropriate to do with the streets in Kenema. I can easily see that becoming a topic for discussion at the board.
Is that something that you know, before we would be adding on-street markings?
You know, generally, we haven't seen on-street markings as being a permanent public improvement, but any kind of changes to the dimensions of the existing road probably would kick in. But I mean, right now, as my staff view, is markings, kind of like painting a house we don't review, kind of markings on existing streets probably wouldn't fit the threshold, but there may be something as we get into implementation. Could be one thing that we did in the 7th Street plan when McLaughlin 7th Street was improved. The Historic Review Board kind of approved a suite of options for street furniture and other things. And so that could be something that the board could look at as, you know, these signs and these suite of improvements, you know, are kind of pre-approved. So when implementation happens, as you know, slowly, because we often get grants for little pieces of it or something gets done, we can kind of pre-approve, so we don't have to go back to the Historic Review Board to get a sign approved in Kenema. We kind of can approve a suite of options. So I think that's a really good conversation of what's paint and what's really a trigger of a major public improvement. And then, you know, the residential parking program, it would be like a corollary program that would be done. But that would only be, that's really just ensuring that people using the McLaughlin Kenema Trail are not parking in McLaughlin, right? I mean, not parking in Kenema. Like, the idea is people are walking through Kenema to get access to these open spaces, but residents are parking in Kenema, and if people feel that visitors to Kenema Bluffs, the metro space, or Kenema Children's Park is eating up residential parking, there is a residential parking permit program that can be done kind of outside of the Historic Review Board process that can look at ensuring adequate parking. What the HRB would be looking at is the physical change to the street.
And that would have to go before before us, before it goes to like transportation, or does it need to be identified?
I think of it as in the sense of,
Transportation
the
master
plan may talk about the big, what this is doing is, this is just a concept plan. So it's,
Right.
right now we have a line on a map, and now we have a better line on a map, and some recommendations for interim improvements. But each time those interim improvements get triggered by the board for review, you would look at it. That's why I kind of would recommend maybe the suite of options, just because you don't want to come back every time. But what triggers the board reviewing is a physical change. So like with the McLaughlin Promenade being on the National Register, if Parks wanted to create a new T intersection of concrete from the McLaughlin Promenade to High Street, that T intersection of concrete will be reviewed by you. Or a new sign, but some paint markings most likely would not. So that's kind of difference between permanent public improvement and just some interim change that's not really affecting the physicalness of the street. So I think right now Kelly's looking for kind of just general guidance as this master plan is adopted, and then you will get the say when each kind of development application comes in for any improvements. But maybe I'll pass it back to Kelly for a second, because like a lot of things, we make these plans and then we figure out, well, how are we gonna do it all at once? Are we gonna get grants? How are we gonna do interim access? How are we gonna do improvements? So I may send it back to you for a second just to give a context of, if this gets adopted in January, now what?
Yeah, we do have a few things that we can start on right away, including closing off that Tumwater Drive turn, working with ODOT to talk about changes to Highway 99E, and working with PGE. But it sounds like what we would do before we would make any physical changes to the streets in Kenema, we would get more detailed designs for those. Like we would actually figure out what exactly the symbol would be, what exactly the signs would be, where exactly they would go, and then we would bring that to you for review before we would go ahead and have Public Works install anything. We don't have funding necessarily identified to get all that work done, so I don't know what the time frame would be exactly, but we would be applying for grants and trying to find some resources to get that done.
Well, it would have to go before the neighborhood also, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that done before it comes to us?
It would.
I can't.
Yeah, actually, it's not a requirement, but for the land use part, but absolutely. I mean, as all public projects, we'll reach out to all the neighborhoods and gain public information. I mean, we did it, we're at the 20,000 feet for the concept plan, and then every time we do, and I think the key thing is adopting this refinement of transportation system plan and our parks plan helps us with grants. It helps us with decision-making especially the version that has it going through those parcels kind of below the Falls View Tavern area, is we need that line on a map to have that conversation, because if it isn't legally there, we can't require a developer to build around it or to incorporate that walkway into like their back parking lot, for example. So that's some legalistic things we need to do in the sense of adopting the master plan.
Cool. Sounds good.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you. I'd like to call your attention in the audience to our public comment cards at the back of the room. If you feel you want to say something during the public hearing, please fill out one of those forms and give it to staff. Are all of you here for the two land use actions that we're going to talk about here?
You're here for the second one.
Okay.
So I actually know that the applicant will not be here tonight.
For the
but
number one?
For the first one.
Why don't we switch them so you do?
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
what I
we
was
can do
going to
that.
propose is switching them. And
I am flexible that way.
okay. In that case, before we move into the public hearing, I will read to you an exciting page of information about quasi-judicial hearings as required by law. Two public hearings will be held tonight on land use applications. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply for each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and by the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedures steps are shown on the chart on the wall. Steps 1, 2. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city will notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony by stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed on the public record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional information or evidence and testimony, or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to these issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court. And now, with that, we will, I'm looking for the number. We will move to H.R. 1709 and open the public record there. I want to first ask members of the board, first, have you visited the properties?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And do you have any ex parte contact or potential conflicts of interest?
Nope.
I do not.
I have also visited the properties. 417 Madison Street is a property that my wife and I listed as realtors 4 years ago at the time the current owners bought it. We worked only with the sellers, so I don't see that as a conflict of interest.
Does anybody want to challenge that?
Okay. In that case, we will move ahead with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair
Oh, you're gonna
Basinger.
do it.
I'm going to be doing it today. What we have here is a side porch addition at 401 Madison Street. It's the Tara and Etta Miller house. It's a nice 1920s bungalow. And I can, come on, there we go. Just doesn't want to work for me.
Just use the arrows.
Okay. This is the subject property. I may use, can I get the, there we go. This is a subject property. The attached garage is right here on the 5th Street side. It's really hard on Google Maps to find a view that's not obstructed by trees, but I found this on the corner elevation. So this is the intersection of Madison and 5th. You'll see there's kind of a double gabled front porch and then the front of the house. This is the existing attached garage in question. The applicant actually came to me last month looking at repairing the existing deck. It's an exposed wood deck on top of the garage, which often happened. Most likely this garage looks either built at the time or soon after. And then as often people find spaces that they want to create the decks so this deck was probably done sometime between the 30s and the 70s. This probably wasn't the first deck on the site. So the applicant came back and wanted to replace the decking on top of the garage, but they wanted to actually this time provide a covered porch to provide some weather protection. And unfortunately, I was not able to do that as a staff because even porches are considered additions to home. So I did work with the property owner, with the applicant on kind of explaining how staff could approve the new railings and the new decking and the stairs, but the actual covered porch would have to be reviewed by the Historic Review Board. So the applicant is actually working right now with our building division, and when he hears from the board tonight, he would like to come back to the building division in the morning and continue onto the porch part if the board moves forward to approve. So this is there. So this is what the applicant has submitted. He's proposing new stairs, new porch decking, a very simplified covered porch. Right now he's showing composition shingles, and well, it's not, it looks like it's not shown here in the CAD drawing. He's indicated that all of the railings will be top railings and bottom railings with the balustrades in between. So I did write that on the condition of approval, just in case it, it just wasn't evident in the CAD, in the design drawings. There is also a question here if this was a knee brace. I'm going to leave it up to the applicant to comment. Denise McGriff of the McLaughlin Neighbors Association did identify that there's no knee braces on this house, so it does not make sense to add a knee brace to a side porch addition. This kind of brace right here, I'm going to have the builder talk a little about. I think it's actually part of the support structure to keep the actual kind of simple porch. So I'll let the builder move up a little bit, but I would like to add a condition of approval that just reiterates that knee braces are not appropriate for.
Those aren't knee braces.
They aren't, okay.
No.
I just want.
That thing up there,
That,
right there, that's a
Yeah.
beam with like a little post sitting on the
Okay.
cross piece. And then those are the beams that are coming out right there.
yeah,
Right there.
Yeah.
On the side. So those are just posted beams, but they're not knee braces.
okay. I didn't think so, but I just wanted to reiterate, and if that is the case, I do agree with that. So that was the comment from Denise McGriff from the McLaughlin Neighbors Association, just to ensure that that was indeed not a knee brace, and to continue the condition of approval about the having the balustrade of the porch post be top and bottom rail. So these are the conditions of approval that staff has written. That inside lumber and pressure-treated wood is not on any visible surface. All railings should be installed with top and bottom rail. That composite or 3-tab roofing is allowed on the porch, and the proposed wood porch post, decking, railings, and stairs shall be painted or paint stained to match the paint scheme in the house. So that is kind of our traditional, conditions of approval for an addition onto a house. So I will move back and show the plan here. And let me know if you want me to go back to show the photo of the house. The applicant is here and is willing to answer any questions, so the board can ask me questions or wait until after the applicant makes their presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. I would now invite the applicant to come forward and please state your name for the record.
Thank you.
And tell us what you want to tell us.
Okay,
Welcome.
welcome, thank you. Yes, I'm John Jenkins. My wife and our kids and I live at 417 Madison Street. This is Alex Boro, my contractor. And basically, when we started this project, we noticed some rot that the inspector did not find when we purchased the house. So it has gotten worse, and we decided to go ahead and try to repair some of the damage. As we proceeded, we got the idea that we probably should put a cover over this structure to make it more functional in the wintertime so that we could actually use that space during the rainy season, and also to protect the structure from the amount of water that currently comes down on that wood deck. So at that point, obviously, project creep, scope creep, got the better of us, and we figured out quickly that we needed to, go through the proper channels to get everything approved and get a decision made on this. So anyway, if there are any other questions that you would like to ask me, feel free. But in a nutshell, that's how this all came about.
I have to compliment you on your application. It was really well done.
Thank you.
We've seen a lot of them, but I thought it was really spot on.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
and I also have to, is everything still painted pink in that house?
No, ma'am. There's the inside of one closet that is
Oh, really?
still, that's
Oh, my
still
God.
pink. Two closets.
I
inside
went
of
to
two
the
closets.
estate sale there and everything, including brooms, ladders. Did you see a lot of pink in there when you, no, that was a long time ago. Anyway, everything was painted pink.
Our next door neighbor told us that there was a, if I remember correctly, he told me that there was a giant pink Cadillac parked in that garage for a long period of time as
I
well.
don't remember that, but
Must have been a
Maybe it
Mary
was-
Kay house.
Maybe it was just a giant Cadillac and not a pink Cadillac, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was pink because there was a lot of pink paint in that house.
and it wasn't a Mary Kay pink either.
I like to call it burnt Peptol Bismol.
It
It
was-
was pretty much what it looked
Yeah.
like.
Can I ask a question? I totally get what you're doing, and it makes sense. I mean, but you would keep the two roof lines in the same pitch.
Absolutely.
Yes,
So we don't know what the existing house pitch is.
I believe it's a 712.
Because
Yeah.
these two pitches are different, the way they're drawn.
Yeah,
Well,
they are.
Yeah,
Just-
but we plan on matching.
Matching it, because it
Yes.
looks like the existing's more like a 6.
It is I think it's, I believe that it's a 7 and 12.
I believe,
Um,
yeah, I haven't measured it, but I'm pretty sure it's a 712. It's a little more than a 6. And when the architect first drew this up, they drew the house as a 6, and I told them to draw the other one.
But they'll be the same.
Yeah,
Yes, they will.
They'll be identical.
So from what Denise made comments about, yeah, they're not knee brackets, but one of her comments, I believe, was about enclosing the porch with a soffit, which would be more akin to the historical nature of the house. And this would be more of an open tongue and groove sort of a look, right? That kind of,
Right.
that's what's on the underside.
Yeah, we were either gonna do tongue and groove, just, we could just do tongue and groove all the way up, or we could soften it where the collar tie is there.
Right.
And do that.
Could you bring that collar tie down a little bit more
Yeah,
and
I'm sure
create?
we could.
So I'm only asking from aesthetics that if you brought that soffit down to where the post and beam is, that you'd get better coverage, better weather coverage. And then if you had that soffit there, it would be a little bit more matching to the front. Not like you're trying to copy it,
Sure.
but you might get better weather coverage, and it would actually look aesthetically better. But
Okay.
you could even bring that down and match that gable front with the house. You could put a cedar soffit or a tongue and groove painted soffit, you know, something, but everything else looks cool. And it's pretty clear your baluster is not down on the surface, it's elevated.
Yes.
But I don't know, is that something that you would be willing to do? That
Sure.
would make it look, because this is cool.
Sure.
This is really cool. It's just a little bit modern.
Okay.
Kind of looking that, yeah, you want to delineate things, but at the same time, everything around it's pretty historic and pretty cool.
There was a little bit of gray area there on how far to
To drop it?
how far to make it look.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
How far to blend it
Sure.
or to delineate it, as you said.
Yeah, and that's one of those tomato things, but
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has a comment on it. It would, personally, it would look cool.
Sure, and I'm all for that.
Yeah, and especially on the front, that's how the front is.
Front
Even though
is,
the front
yeah.
has a little beefier columns, you could match that. You could even put a little thicker column other than a 6x6.
The front of the house, or you're talking about the front of the house?
Yeah, yeah. But you don't really want to do that. This is subjugated. It's a secondary
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
to be the primary cool. So you want to make it be a part of the house, but kind of disappear too.
Right.
I
I
don't
was
think
almost-
wider column,
No.
bigger column.
That's why I'm saying you could wrap these posts, obviously, which I would think you'd do. 6x6 wrapped would look pretty cool.
Yeah, it would, but I was almost thinking that wrapping all that, you know, once you start wrapping the 6x6, then you gotta match it
Accentuates.
with the beams and stuff, and it might start to look
Well,
too big.
not unless you just have a soffit that
Right,
comes down and you don't
bottom.
have the beams. Then you're just matching and you're only dealing with the posts.
Yeah.
You eliminate that problem right away. So, I don't know.
I'll have to make sure we can get that head height.
Looks like you
I think
could.
we can for sure, but, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my suggestion was to drop that and soffit. But again, I don't know. Not trying to make it look like geranimals, but anyway, that was my only thing. Everything else totally makes sense.
Any other questions for the applicant? In that case, we thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so on staff, I have potentially 2 additional conditions of approval, and so maybe this could be part of your deliberations. I'll throw it out there for discussion. You guys can think.
Okay.
Is the applicant, so a new condition number 2, the applicant shall ensure that the proposed porch is the same pitch as the main house.
Yeah.
We'll just keep it vague, so we don't have to use a number.
Yeah, it's whatever the
Yeah.
existing is to
matching,
match.
yeah.
And then the next one, 3, is about the soffit. So what I don't know is if the board wants the applicant to redesign to have a soffit, or potentially have an option where if the applicant wants to redesign to have a soffit, they can. So that's some of that discussion of, do you want to require the soffit redesign, or do you want to allow it as an option B? And then if the applicant does redesign, provide a soffit to match, how would you want to put that condition?
Could it be just subject to staff approval? And not
No,
have to-
because you need to rate your conditions of
say what it
approval
is.
very specifically.
Specificity.
And you can provide option A and option B, and we do that often. But you have to provide enough clear direction, so when Kelly goes out there
Clarity,
and
yeah.
is asked to final, she can read your conditions and be able to tell the applicant, like, yep, you met it, or no, you didn't. So just as staff doesn't work, because
Okay.
Kelly needs direction on when to approve or deny a building permit.
Gotcha.
I-
I think the soffit makes a lot more sense.
And you're talking essentially enclosing that gable end.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, wait.
So the record is closed, but we can open it if you want to have a more conversation. So hold on a second.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah, come on up.
open the record
I
again.
was just gonna ask, either way, we're softening it, right? But what if it changed the look, just if we filled in that upper part where you can see that beam, and it's gonna be all softened underneath, you know, just so it kinda has the underneath look is gonna have a little bit on the sides and then on the top instead of it just being super flat.
Yeah, that just wouldn't be something you would see. But, I mean, historically or akin to the style of the house, you just wouldn't see that.
Okay.
And to me, it looks like they stopped prematurely. You know, I think going down.
Yeah, I think I'm not trying to add cost or incur cost or anything,
No,
but
no,
I'm also thinking if you do this, it might cost a little bit, but you wouldn't have to have exposed beams. You wouldn't have to worry about collar ties other than, you'd come out this way and then you could soften it. It's 6 1/2 dozen the other, but from the aesthetic point, it wouldn't look right.
Okay.
Your head height would still be the same.
I see this as a sitting porch as much as it is a functional entry porch. Is it your intention to have that sitting area be under a vaulted ceiling? Is that
I thought
why
it
you're
would
leaning
look-
that way?
I thought it would look a little nicer, when you're sitting underneath it, to have it somewhat vaulted. I mean, obviously, it's not gonna be vaulted all the way up. And either way, that top one, the top beam isn't gonna be exposed, because we're gonna soften that, but
Yeah.
whatever way we have to go, but. And we could even still drop that collar tie down some,
If you drop it down some, then you're almost there.
Yeah, I know.
That's why it's,
Well,
yeah, and then you can just hanger your joists from beam to beam and then bring your soffit. Oh, you can either come out this way or this way with the soffit material.
okay. Well,
It all makes sense. It all looks great. You would have definitely head height. If that window's really accurate, that's gonna be a water issue. But, anyway.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. So back to deliberation. I think what I'm hearing for a potential new condition of number of approval 3 is this a kind of a compulsory redesign? And if so, what would it be? Or is it an optional redesign, and what would it be for the concept of a soffit?
Man. I don't know.
Is there a structural reason that you couldn't enclose the gable end and leave the vaulted ceiling
No.
by having the beam up in the ridge?
They've got a beam up in the ridge. If
Yeah.
they drop it to the soffit, they won't need a beam at the ridge. They'll have a compression ridge, so that saves. By dropping the soffit down, it's just stick framing. It could even be trusses with the soffit. That would be cheaper. If you drop the soffit down to the post and beam height, those could be trusses, which would be very inexpensive, and then the money could go into the details of the soffit, which would be more akin to the style of the house.
Yeah.
So I would, are we looking for a motion, or are you just trying to get clarity on condition?
I'm trying to get clarity on condition number 3.
So
And
number
I think we all agree
3
about the matching the roof line, but,
Condition 3 would be matching the roof line.
no, condition number 2 would be matching the roof
Oh,
line.
okay.
Yeah.
Then 3 would be dropping the soffit to the post and beam level. That would be similar to the front porch. That would require a tongue and groove soffit material with a finished gable end. And I think in the long run will be less expensive and will look to the aesthetic of the house and in keeping with the architectural character of the house. So that would be that third condition.
Okay, so prior to, actually, well, they already, so the applicant shall drop the soffit to post and beam level, similar to the front porch, and, oh, sorry, I can't read my handwriting. The soffit material will be, ensure that the soffit material is finished with, oh, sorry, excuse me. Drop the soffit to the post and beam level similar to the front porch with tongue and groove material. Soffit material will be finished to match the gable end. Did I get that?
The soffit material will be a tongue and groove, but
Yeah.
the gable end will be finished to match the existing siding of the house.
Okay. And that is a compulsory condition, not an option?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't see why they should be able to go in tomorrow and get a permit
Yeah,
and
yeah, we
move
can do that.
forward. So, yeah, so should I make that motion
Yeah. you can
to
make
approve this
amended.
application with those three conditions?
Are we clear on the,
Actually,
are we clear on the
We're closed.
balusters, on the railing
I think we
issues?
talked about that they're shown on the drawing as
Yeah.
Yes.
elevated.
so we do have a citizen who does want to make public comment. The board does not have to open the public record, but I'm just opening it up if they wish to.
We will,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, we already had her, oh, okay.
The board always, before the final vote, the board can always choose to open the public record.
Yes.
Okay.
So we just hold whatever I just said.
Yeah, just hold what you just said, thank you. Obviously, you know I was someplace else, so I apologize. I was waiting for the call, which I got, to come on over, because I was across the street, because we have a double-booked meeting. Anyway, I'm Denise McGriffin, I'm testifying on behalf of the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. We took a look at the proposal. I had contact with the property owner, and basically what I told them was that it looked pretty good, and I would go by and look at the property and make sure that everything matched up. And so my only comments that I submitted were the fact that the gable end there with the little bracket and the bar across, if that's a bar, again, it was very small. If you look at the front elevation, and since the front elevation and the street elevation are very visible, that there isn't a gable end like that on the front part of the house. Otherwise, we thought it was great. It looks like the railing and the balustrade are top and bottom the way they're supposed to be. And I think it will definitely be, the neighborhood association thinks it will definitely be an improvement, and it will cause the property owner to not have so much more maintenance. So basically, we recommended approval of the request subject to removal of the bracket end. So that's it.
Yeah, so just FYI, it wasn't a bracket, and we talked about dropping it down and
Yeah.
all those things.
I can only go by what's submitted on the plan.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
everything
so-
you're saying is
Okay,
spot
thank
on.
you.
Thank you.
On the front elevation, they have the return gable. And
Right.
it's, I think, even though that's what it is on the front, I think keeping that off the side, just keeping it simple.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it
Makes it
there.
as a subsequent, same with the balustrades.
And
I mean, the
that could be a thing that delineates, hey, this
columns.
is a little different.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because it has the return on the main gable as well. So,
Keep
okay.
it simple.
So I think we can go back to what Mr. McLaughlin was about to.
You were about to make a motion.
Make a motion.
Actually, you know what? We always have to give the applicant an ability if they want to make any comment.
Oh, yeah, rebuttal, right?
If the applicant wants to make any rebuttal comment, it's just a part of our process. We've opened up the record for the neighborhood association to comment. You have the option to comment or not comment.
I have no comment other than to say thank you. Oh. Yes, I have no further comment other than to say thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Should I start it?
You could go for it.
So I should make them, what the fetch is it? I'd make a motion to approve 1709 for a covered porch addition with the
You can say the amended conditions. as
amended
discussed.
aforementioned conditions of approval.
I will second it.
Thank you. Now, poll the members.
Board Member Mann?
Aye.
Board Member Met?
Aye.
Chair Basinger?
Aye.
Board Member McLaughlin?
Aye.
The motion carries. And congratulations.
You can get your permit tomorrow.
Thank you. All right. John.
Thanks. As a young
We move now to HR 1708. But where can we go with that without the applicant present?
They're fine. They indicated they were not going to be here tonight, and they were fine with that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
We approved this, what, 3 years ago? Mm-hmm. And
2 years ago.
was it 2 years? So
Two and
was
a
it
half, I think 2.5.
like on the tail end of whenever I was here or something like that?
Yeah.
So, okay. I was just asking when it was we did this, because I remember
Yeah.
dealing
It's
with this.
deja vu all over again, right?
So that approval has expired.
So, Chair Basinger, I don't think you have to do the beginning, but you still have to do the ex parte contact and conflict of interest.
Has everybody visited the site? And does anybody have any ex parte contact or potential conflicts of interest to declare?
Nope.
No.
Nor I.
I have visited. No conflicts.
And we'll move to the staff report then.
Thank you, Chair Basinger. So this is actually the third time this office proposal has been in front of the Historic Review Board. The first time, it was at a little bit different design. So the version you see here tonight is the second version of this design. HR 1708 was originally HR 1503, and it was approved by the Historic Review Board as well with the companion site plan design review. The applicant was able to get an extension on the site plan design review and plans to move forward with construction, but they were about 2 months off of the expiration date for the Historic Review Board approval. Ergo, when you are past 2 years, you do not get an allowance to ask for that year extra extension. You have to come back in front of the Historic Review Board in front of a new notice public hearing. So this is the exact same application that was in front of the board 2 years ago, and I think we're going to talk about the exact same issues, though if the board members want to bring up additional issues or we want to have different conversations, times change, we have different interpretations, I think this is the time to do that. Just to provide a little context to you. All right, this doesn't work. So this is the empty lot at Center Street. BC Custom Homes is in this existing Foursquare building right here that is on High Street, and they want to relocate to this lot, which is right behind their parking lot and their main building. This area, the McLaughlin Conservation District, has kind of a lot of very different design types. You have a very kind of squat, unique one-story bungalow, which I don't think we have something in this dramatic design of a 1920s bungalow. And then on the other side, we have a 1970s concrete stucco building. Behind us is the church a little bit, the Catholic church behind us. You have also in the same neighborhood, and I didn't put it on the plan, but in your packet, we have the probably 3 1.5 or 2.5 story buildings. We have a large Queen Anne building, the Agnes and Martin McDowell House, which is kind of kitty corner as a law office. McDonough, is that how you say it? McDonough. You have the Albert and Sadie Price House, which is a 1.5 story bungalow. You have the C.I. Stafford House, which is a 1.5 story bungalow. And then, of course, 410 High Street, which is the kind of 2 story and change Foursquare. So there is quite a difference of building types in the area. This one happens to be a very short building, but it's not it's really actually more the exception than the rule, I think, in this area. So the office building would be front off of Center Street, and then there would be parking access in the rear. This is a streetscape, so you can kind of see the difference in the smaller 1920s bungalow here. Then this is the McDowell House, the Queen Anne that's right here, across the street on 5th. The applicant has proposed kind of a Queen Anne vernacular look to the office building. You can see the layout. They provided Fiberglass windows, there's a condition of approval that requires them to be Marvin integrity or equivalent. The hardy plank siding is looking at smooth siding as well as the smooth hardy panel frame and the scallops, the scallop fiber shingles here. There is some turned wood posts, which are proposed, and I know Ms. McGriff has some comments without the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. I think last time staff did not, so I'll leave it up to the board to have that conversation. This is the rear, so you're in the parking lot looking at the rear, and then this is the side elevation as you kind of drive into the parking lot. And that's the elevation closest to the historic one-story bungalow. So the McLaughlin comment was they continue to support the construction, sorry about the misspelling, of the office building. However, we feel the columns should be increased in size to be more proportional with the size of the structure and the long roof line. And I did let the applicant know about that comment, that may be a condition and that they were okay with that if the board did feel that they needed to redesign the porch, the turned porch posts. The other piece I wanted to bring in the conditions of approval is the Oregon City Municipal Code 1762, which is our site plan design review code, requires a 10-foot massing on the ground floor for commercial structures. However, the Historic Review Board is able to make findings to support a modification. And in this situation, the board did that 2 years ago because a 10-foot height limit would not necessarily be appropriate for this type of residential architecture for an office building. And so what the findings the boards are allowed to do if these conditions of approval are added, that when that will support the previous approval, which did allow that height to be reduced. And so the board did that last time, and those conditions of approval can maintain in the site plan design review. So that is one thing the board should do if they believe that that is something that is should be required to make the ground floor more historically appropriate in massing and size. And then, I'm sorry, when I pasted this, the PowerPoint decided to renumber any of these. It's condition approval in 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I apologize for the PowerPoint. These are rear, number 4. The fourth I, are our traditional conditions of approval, as well as all of the material that have been spec'd out in the applicant's material spec sheet, which I can go back to right there.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What is the current height of the first floor?
It's, as proposed, I believe it's 9 feet.
9.
Yeah. And so they're proposing the height they want, not the height that the code wants them to be.
And that's what was approved?
That was approved last time, correct. So I'm available if anybody has any questions, and then I know Denise most likely will have other public comment.
Okay. We'll invite McLaughlin Neighborhood.
Did you actually open the public?
I still have another question.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Oh, you may, yeah.
The columns, I believe, were a discussion prior that something, I don't remember what happened with them, but they were changed. I think they had a handrail or something like that, and it was eliminated, and then these columns came in.
I think so, yeah, the original version did not have these columns.
Yeah.
The first of the 3.
That's right.
What I can do is, I'm going to do a quick check on the notice of decision, just to make sure that.
I mean, I can't remember what it was before, but I know.
That we aren't missing anything. So while Ms. McGriff is speaking, I'm going to do a quick check to make sure that the notice of decision, I don't think it had any changes. I think the board approved as is. But
I think so.
every time I think.
With the railing?
No, they
No.
approved the railings
No,
as is.
just like this. Yeah.
Okay.
Every time I think my memory's correct, I'm wrong, so I will do a double check while
can't
we have
remember
public comment.
Anyway.
We will then
Thank
open
you.
the public hearing and invite.
Thank you. It's been a long day. This is my 4th meeting today. Denise McGriff, representing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, and as was stated, we did support this particular application, and one of the things that we had concerns about from 3 years, was it 3 years ago or 2 years ago?
2 and change.
2 and change years ago, was that making sure that there were specific findings showing that the increased height of this particular residentially styled office building was not going to compromise the historic building next door. So all the buildings that she talked about that are adjacent but not directly adjacent are all designated historic landmarks. And so that's where you took your cue. And since I know you just had your land use review and of legal stuff, I think that you need to again reinforce findings that support that particular change, even though the house next to it or the building next to it, which was residential, is only a one-story. So it does not compromise the historic integrity of that adjacent historic structure. The reason that, matter of fact, I had a conversation with Todd about 3 days ago, and I said, we think everything's great. We had commented before that we thought the porch posts needed to be just a little bit bigger because that is a very long elevation where the porch posts are, and I don't have the plans with me at the moment, so I can't tell you whether they were, 2 feet around or 3 feet around, but Todd said that he had already planned to make a small change that way to make the posts a little bit more robust. And so if you look at the McLaughlin Conservation District, the porch posts that are turned similar to this are proportional to the scale of the porch that they're holding up. So it's not like a little tiny spindle. So that was the only comment that, we had. We thought everything else looked great. We totally agree with the, is that your condition rule number 3?
Reducing the height, yeah.
Yeah, because this again is not a typical commercial corridor. And in order for this particular structure to more appropriately fit into the district, it is appropriate to modify that condition to reduce that height. That 10 feet would be proportionally out of scale with the neighborhood. And I don't think that BC Homes was trying to create something that wasn't going to fit in. And I think, again, having gone through their first iteration and now their second iteration, this one is more appropriate. And it's not, people are going to know this is a new building, but it's going to be complementary to the things that are around it. And that's really what we're looking at when we do new construction in either of the districts. And I think this is appropriate. But making it taller and not allowing them to do that reduction is just not going to work. So I'm hoping, again, that you will concur with the staff's recommendation and make specific findings that address that, because this is an exception. This is not the rule. So that's pretty much it. So we, again, support this application, and we'd just like to see it built because we don't like that parking lot sitting there being used as a de facto parking lot.
For a Victorian-style house, those could be classic columns too, with a base and capital.
Oh, sure, it could be an Ionic or a Doric, without the turning. It could be, to be honest with you, probably would look nicer with it being simpler.
Yeah.
Sort of so ornate.
A little thicker but simpler, like
Yes.
a basic Ionic. But the other context of it is, just for what it's worth, something like this would have been historic. The one next to it would have come far after.
The one that's next to it.
Yeah, the Craftsman, the Pasadena style.
It's
bungalow.
really the only building of that type in our district. It's very unique. It's
straight out of Southern California.
It's pretty awesome. And when it was occupied,
statement.
one of our residents, Rita Mills, said she knew everybody. She said she used to know the people that lived there.
Rita lives next door to my duplex.
Yes.
I know everything because of Rita.
Well,
and I know when I need to mow my lawn for my duplex.
Because Rita tells
Because Rita calls.
Yeah, but she said that it was a lovely home, and it was a dentist's office for quite a while.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it converted to this holistic health, can't think of what they call it, but anyway, services. So it's
That's fun.
It's definitely unique. And when I do that tour of that portion of the neighborhood, I always point that particular building out because, again, we don't have anything else like it in the neighborhood.
It's cool.
It's a very nice house.
And there was a nice house that was there before.
Well,
They had a big gas explosion.
the one that burned down on Rex Nakute's property?
No, on this
Yeah,
one.
No.
yeah, on this site, yeah, I know. We tried to get him to salvage it. It could have been salvageable, but didn't quite work out. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
Chair Basinger, I want to have a factual a change to one of my comments. I apologize. It's the end of the evening. Our site plan design review code requires 14-foot ceilings on the ground floor, and this is a proposed 11-foot ceiling height. And so it's the actually, so,
So it's 15?
it's, the site plan design review code requires 14-foot floor to height ceilings, and the applicant is proposing an 11-foot height ceiling. So I apologize with my previous number. No.
Better at 11 than...
It's 11 foot,
Yeah, 'cause nine
but the
would
code
be
requires 14 feet, and for the most part, the code, you write clear and objective code for a traditional
office buildings.
commercial, or just a traditional, even historic commercial design, and so you are kind of, in a sense, doing your job as Historic Review Board and having that lens, which says, hey, clear and objective site plan design review, it's a little different here. And so that's how the two of you kind of work in concert with each other, is you're able to kind of allow those modifications because they better meet the intent of the site plan and design review code, which is to provide compatible infill in a neighborhood.
So should the condition be 11 feet or 10 feet?
Hold on. I think the board, what I would recommend is, now remembering this conversation from 2 years ago. There was a conversation about it maybe even going farther down from 11 to 10. And so I think when we did this condition of approval, it was to allow that little extra bit of wiggle room if the applicant wanted to go down even to 10 feet, even though they have it proposed as 11. And now I remember that. So I would recommend a staff is keeping the same condition of approval that says, they can go down as low as 10 as part of this, but they don't have to meet the 14 feet requirement of site plan design review.
Okay. Comments?
What height is the second floor? It seems like it has a lot of
It's
roof.
9.
It's just this tall roof.
That's
It's all
because of
Very
pitch.
pitched,
It's
very
just
pitched
the whole
yeah.
roof, okay.
It's like a 10,
Yeah,
12.
that's a pretty steep pitch roof.
Scary.
Wouldn't want to roof it.
What do we do?
I think it'll be a nice addition, to the neighborhood.
Regarding
I-
the
Posts.
height on the main floor, 14 feet is outrageous in architecturally speaking. I'm not complaining about the code, I'm just saying that in this application, that would be pretty outrageous. And so I would push for bringing it down as low as is feasible.
Which I think is I think this is the exact conversation we had last time, was
Yeah.
even allowing it to go down as low as 10.
And as far as the posts go, the more I look at them, yes, they need to be beefier and stuff, but it's got some ornamentation, but I think, like you were saying, doing instead of a turn post, doing like a chamfered or,
An ionic,
something like
basic.
that. Or just something basic.
But would give the beefiness and simplicity. to
Right.
it. Yeah.
Do you want to make that a condition of approval?
We could recommend, are we able just to recommend that it be, say that it needs to be of a larger dimension, but we recommend that they keep it simpler?
Well, here, let me get the conditions.
Or do we have to be
of approval.
specific?
I think you have to be a little more specific.
Specific, okay.
So,
Sorry, there we go. So I think
so
just like the
door,
the application previously, is this the applicant shall redesign the porch posts? To do this, I'm kind of hearing couple options. One, you could provide a little bit more direction to the existing term porch posts, kind of akin a little bit to what the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. So I think you still have to define what make slightly bigger means. So once again, imagine Kelly going out on site.
Size, yeah.
What does that mean? Two, if you're going to allow an alternative design, what would it be? And is it required? So kind of A is if you're going to so here's it. Option
Shall
A.
or should?
Option A is nothing, like, approve as proposed. Option B would be to provide a little bit more detail about how the turn post shall be increased in size and massing. And then another option would be to provide an alternate design or to require the alternate design. So I can let you think about that and we can write conditions of approval. I think for this, especially with the applicants not there, I think in your deliberations about that additional condition, going back to what Carrie spoke about last hour, was tie those deliberations and direction into how that condition of approval is making it more compatible to the house design, which then makes the house more compatible to the district. Yeah, I can look.
So
That was
I'm looking at the drawing here, and the fenestration is all for Queen Anne gingerbread. And that includes the porch where there's the spindle work under the eaves. And I find that spindle work to be more compatible with a turned column than it just
That's a good point, yeah.
seems that way. I don't remember specifically a couple of the Queen Anne houses on Fifth Street have similar details with the spindle work. I don't know if we have those pictures here. I think not.
It could be, like you're saying, just beefier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just looking at columns.
Oh, this one is turned,
On the McDonald house.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the judge's house up the street, I don't remember.
It does, because they're painted different colors with each carving.
Yeah, yeah.
It could be that way, just
Yeah,
thicker.
the one up the street.
Yeah, because the fenestration above the columns has that definite Victorian look. So, yeah.
So just so that, I don't have the specific dimensions, and I'd have to print this out to get my scale, and I don't have it with me. So if the board would like that, I can go do that, we can close the meeting, but you have what I have.
From an architectural standpoint, what would be the expected diameter of a turned column like that? Or is there any such thing? Can you make a generalization like that?
Well, you can look at these and say, wow, this is a massive house, and these look like toothpicks. And to try and bring down the verticality of it, you could say these columns should be 8 to 9 inches thick. And that might be, or 8 to 10 inches thick, not 4 to 6. And we can make that kind of a condition, give a parameter of a thickness, perhaps. So maybe that's the condition, a condition? Would it be another condition?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, that's that question of,
It could be a condition, whatever number, that would be basically saying,
This is like
the columns could be turned, allowed turned columns for the front porch with a parameter of 8 to 10 inches in diameter. Throughout the column. So that's a little bit more specific instead of at the base or the capital.
oh, right, and everything gets.
Right. So that gives the parameter of the size. Would that sound groovy?
I think it does.
So that would be the condition. So
So that would be condition of approval number 5.
we could,
half one on the end down there.
if it's a motion to approve as it is with those conditions.
Right, so it would be as is, however, the additional condition 5, that the applicant shall revise the columns to allow turn columns, the applicant shall redesign the columns to provide a more substantial column of a parameter of 8 to 10 inches throughout the length of the column.
Correct.
You want to make your comment?
One suggestion is at the far right of the porch there is to have a half column. 'Cause
An engaged column
yeah.
on that end?
Or is that too much?
I don't think
Because a
you'd
lot
have
of
it.
time, huh?
I wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't? Okay.
Only because it would get kind of squishy right there. So, because these are kind of spaced out. And
Oh, they're not
typically-
spaced,
John, can
yeah.
you point to that on the
Yeah.
screen?
You can't see what I'm pointing at?
Here.
Right here, she's saying, I was saying an engaged
like a
column
half.
here, but it might be kind of squishy because these are so spaced out. You know, if this was further over here, then maybe.
Yeah,
Typically, when you have an engaged, it's usually with a base.
right.
But I would say, no, I would leave it
Okay.
on.
That was just, a lot of
That's a
times
good
they're,
question.
a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
times they're, finished with that one on the end.
But if you cut that, it would almost look like, hey, what is that thing on the corner board? Because it wouldn't be that thick, you know what I mean?
Right, but most times they aren't. They're like half.
Right, it's
Yeah.
engaged is what it's
Right.
called, but it would be, yeah,
All right.
I don't think I would. That's me. But anyway,
Are we ready to write it up as a motion?
sure.
Yeah.
I would move
I think
to
I'd see-
approve HR 1708 with the conditions
As
That are-
amended.
or what?
As amended.
As amended. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Yes, that's what I would do.
I'll second it.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Met.
Aye.
Chair Basinger.
Aye,
Board Member McLaughlin.
Aye.
the motion carries. And with that, we've wrapped up our agenda unless there are any closing words of wisdom. If not, then this meeting is adjourned.
Saddle up.
Okay.